A and B are review of things we've already done, and C is something new. So in A, that 3 outside, well, that will be a vertical stretch. You're going to multiply your y values by 3. It also means that the amplitude is going to be 3. So whenever we graph, and this is one of the things as a process, we are going to label our period. So in this case, our period is 2 pi, and always divide it into 4 equal sections. In this case, it's just your axes family. Then label your amplitude to help figure out what your maximum and minimum are going to be. Since our amplitude is 3, our maximum is going to be 3, our minimum is going to be -3. Going to graph this, the sine graph starts in the middle going up, so it goes middle to max, back to middle, down to minimum, back to the middle. And having that vertical stretch just changes our amplitude, and we can use that as a shortcut to quickly graph our sine graph. In B, now the 3 is inside our function. From transformations, we know this is a horizontal compression. Our x value gets multiplied by 1/3. And in regards to sine and cos, we just learned this morning that we have this formula that our period is always 2 pi divided by our b value. And in this case, if our b value is 3, our period is going to be 2 pi over 3. Well, you can see that from the formula, but if you think about the period being 2 pi, and you have a horizontal compression by 1/3, your period of 2 pi is now getting squished to be 1/3 of 2 pi, which becomes 2 pi over 3 as well. So the formula for period 2 pi over b is just applying your stretches and compressions, so you could always figure it out if you forgot the formula. So now when we go to graph this one, as I said in the previous example, we always start by graphing our period. If our period is 2 pi over 3, I'm going to make some mark somewhere and say this distance is 2 pi over 3. I can now divide this into 4 equal sections. What's half of 2 pi over 3? 1 pi over 3. What's half of pi over 3? Pi over 6. And if this is 1 pi over 6 and each of these sections are equal, 1 pi over 6, 2 pi over 6, this one will be 3 pi over 6, which you could write as pi over 2 if you wanted, or you could leave it like that. Here, the number in front is still a 1, so our amplitude is 1, so we can label our maximums at 1, our minimums at -1. Where does the sine graph start? In the middle going up. Up, middle, minimum, middle, add your arrowheads, and we've got our graph. Finally, the last one where we have something new. What happens when there's a +3 afterwards? Whoops. That's outside the function, so it'll be vertical, not horizontal. It'll be a vertical translation. You're going to move up 3. How are we going to use this for a shortcut? Well, your sinusoidal axis in every question we've done so far has been at y equals 0. In fact, we haven't even drawn it in, even though we could add it into these previous ones. Your average, your sinusoidal axis, your center line is actually, I know in the last two examples I said we'll start by doing our period, but even before that, because we haven't had this example yet, this will be the very first thing that we'll start with always. So in this question, if it's been moved up 3, in particular in sinusoidal graphs, that means your sinusoidal axis has been moved up 3. So the first thing I'm going to do is draw a dotted line at y equals 3 and add it in. What's our period for this function? Well, there's no b value, so our period is going to be just 2 pi. So I'll mark 2 pi on my x-axis and divide it into 4 equal sections. Pi, pi over 2, and 3 pi over 2. And this is where the fact that our a value is a 1 is going to be different than other examples we've done. Our a value is 1 means our amplitude is 1. What is your amplitude? The definition of amplitude was the distance from the center line to the maximum and the center line to the minimum. So if my center line is at 3, does it make sense that my maximum is going to be 4 and my minimum is going to be 2? That would keep an amplitude of 1. And so when we go to graph this, we ask ourselves, where does sine start? Sine starts in the middle going up. And this is why I've always been using that language instead of saying it starts at 0. Because starting in the middle is right on your sinusoidal axis. Going up means at the first ticking mark, it's at a maximum, then back to your middle line, then to your minimum, then back to your middle line. And so this is the graph of y equals sine x plus 3. Questions for practice? 6 and 7.